Bring in now Jenna Clarke, Associate Editor of The Australian. Jenna, good to see you again. You've written about this trend of how the Prime Minister's trying to capture the young vote by being highly embarrassing.
Yeah, he has been pretty cringe, especially to those that are losing collagen at a rate of knots, because these young 20-somethings are severely way more cooler than I am. But I do love the fact that in that clip, when he was talking to those influencers, he basically tried to reframe the Delulu with no Salulu, but in the context of Peter Dutton and the nuclear policy. And the look on the girls' faces, they had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. So the disconnect between the political class and the influencer class is very, very vast. But this is really interesting because, sorry.
No, go for it, Jenna.
It is really interesting because he's been on this social media shadow play for a good part of about a year now, because he did appear on Abby Chatfield's podcast called It's a Lot, and he spoke for about an hour and a half about everything from Medicare, Mediscare, everything against the coalition, pumping up what he seems to have achieved in office without really being challenged on anything. And interestingly, Peter Dutton declined to appear on that podcast, which a lot of people are saying it was because, Abby's a progressive woman, which is actually incorrect, because sources told me that it's because she has a very strong anti-Zionism streak is why he declined.
And he should have declined. And
it's really interesting.
I was personally so angry that Albanese went on that podcast, because, you remember she said she wasn't going to have any Zionists on her podcast, Zionists just being Jews and other people who support Israel. But let's not get into that path. I mean, the Prime Minister, though, I think there's a lot of anger over the fact that he actually paid for these influencers, and there were quite a few of them, to travel to Canberra to cover the budget. And a lot of ministers gave quite significant amounts of their one-on-one time to these influencers. Why should taxpayers be paying for this?
Yeah, no, they weren't paid for content, but they were paid for their travel and accommodation, which is basically the same as paying them. But it is interesting that those key ministers, being Jim Chalmers, Katie Gallagher, and even Tanya Plibersek, gave an exorbitant amount of time to these online thought givers and opinion makers. And interestingly, as we saw in Newspoll, which was published on Monday in The Australian, I think it's worked, because you look at the breakdown in those tables where the question was asked about the budget, Dr. Chalmers' budget, saying, do you think that you will be better off within the next 12 months? The 18 to 24-year-old cohort overwhelmingly said yes, they would be, and only 10% of older Australians said that they would be worse off. So the proof will be in the pudding on May 3, but if the polls taking place at this point in time are any indicator, it looks like it may have paid off, or the Australian taxpayers have paid off for the Labor Party.
Well, to me, I don't know if Delulu stands for delusional, but it should, and they're all Delulu. But Jenna, I want to talk about these schools that have gone Delulu as well. They've gone well and truly woke. An email went out to parents today at Sherwood Ridge Primary School, where the principal said that now the school expects that all students will attend the Anzac Day service. This is a big backflip initially. They said there was an opt-out of the service. And then on 2GB this morning, Ben Fordham revealed that another school is not having a kindy to year 2 Easter hat parade. Instead, they're calling it the annual hat parade, the word Easter gone. I mean, Jenna, this is so, it's beyond the pale to not celebrate Easter and to not recognise Anzac Day. They've now backflipped on it, but this was their instincts, and who knows what other schools are doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely disgusting. And what really gets me is that I hope that every single journo that fronts up to the government's election spokesperson, being Jason Clare, tomorrow and for the next couple of days, he's always banging on about how we have to have a revolution in our schools, and it doesn't matter about what your postcode or what you grew up with, what you need to get a great education. Talk about the fundamental failings in our education system. Our kids cannot even read, write or count, and then this type of crap is being forced down their throats. It is, look, I don't mean to sound like some sort of banshee, but it is completely un-Australian. It makes my blood boil. Anzac Day is one of the most sacred days on our calendar as a country. And the fact that kids were potentially being given the option to opt out, I would love to know what some of the excuses would be, because I would be the first with an Australian flag to say, kid, you are celebrating and marking. You don't celebrate Anzac Day, obviously. You mark
Commemorating.
Anzac Day
Yes.
because you mark Anzac Day because it is a sacred day in our country.
Indeed, well said. Jenna Clarke, thank you for your time.